to have information about what those requirements are. And that could be just that we have a description sitting on the drive and a link to it in 92 minutes.
Okay.
Rather than just kind of, so if I was coming back, you know, as a community member and reading the minutes, I might not have any idea what that meant. And then for the motion and the amended motion for 155 Billboard, I'm wondering if we could amend it to include the word habitable space lining parking deck. It just said habitable space, but it was really about the parking infrastructure. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was it, but there was a motion that amended it. Anybody else? Okay, how about a motion with those couple of amendments?
So moved.
Second? Great. Thank you all. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. So we have a couple members of city staff here to talk about snow in November. And here comes Andrew. Great. Do you guys want to give us an update? I don't know if we need to, is everybody aware of the issue? Do we need to talk about the issue? Tell what we're talking about? Everybody aware? You're aware? Okay. Great. Good morning.
Good morning. Ben Woody, I'm the Director of Development Services Department. I have Martin Lethigny with me, who is the city's chief building official. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give kind of a brief overview of where things stand and kind of the communication we've had with the contractor at this point. Then I'm very quickly going to put it to Mark for any technical questions you may have about the process of the project. So the Harris building is using a exterior finish called EFIS, which is exterior insulation finishing system. And and it's common, it's a pretty common architectural feature these days. And doing a little, and I've only been in Nashville for a little over a year, but I did some Googling and I discovered that some impacts of EFIS occurred with the AC Marriott. I saw an article in that paper as well as with Cambridge. So this isn't new to Asheville. But essentially what happens is when they install this product on the building, there's a foam, like substrate or a foam backing, and they literally rasp it. So the way I could explain that is they kind of rough sand it, and sanding those joints in that foam, little pieces of styrofoam fall off. Quite frankly, if there's no preventive measures put in place, it really looks like it's snowing. Because I walked by the building Friday for lunch, and I was like, is it snowing? For a second, no, it's like 6 degrees, so it can't be snowing. But it is intrusive. It's very dirty. I completely acknowledge that. So what we did is we contacted the contractor, Sean Bowman, who is the superintendent for Cleveland Construction, and said this is unacceptable, but we need some sort of measures put in place to try to manage this. One thing I want to be really clear about is it's probably, I'm not going to say it's impossible. There may be some measures that can be put in place, but generally it's very, very close to impossible to prevent any of those little foam pieces from leaving that job site or that building. I think because the Harris is so tall, and it's been windy lately, I think it's pretty, the impact of it's pretty noticeable and pretty far reaching under the current context. It's not happening on the second floor or something where it's easier to manage. So what we did on Friday is we asked the contractor to put in place some measures to try to manage that foam that's coming off the building. So the types of things they can do immediately is these rasping tools, these sanders, they can attach vacuums to them. And what that does is that pulls in some of the foam into the vacuum. Probably isn't going to catch it all, but it's going to help some. They agreed to do that. I walked back on Friday and I saw a crew on the side of the building using vacuum rasp, but and I had a building inspector verify this. On Monday we went back and there were crews that were not using vacuum rasp. So the initial response was not thorough. And so I want to say on Tuesday of this week, I believe it was Tuesday, we actually made them get off the swings and stop working. And he said, no, you're going to have to at least do what you said you were going to do. So to my knowledge, only by yesterday they were using vacuum rasp. They've got crews, they've agreed to put crews on the street to try to vacuum up the foam. I recognize that's an impossible task. If you've seen the foam walking around the shop vac, it's going to help, but it's not going to be. I mean, it's very difficult to manage, I guess, is what I'll say. So, from my perspective, what we're doing now is we have the expectation that they're going to use vacuum tools. That's not just for rasping. If you notice, maybe they cut joints into the foam. They need a whole shop vac and literally suck the foam as they're cutting joints. So we are committed to making sure they're using vacuums on the side of the building to try to to clean up those citizens' private properties. We've had a few folks that said their stuff in my patio, whatever. We are, number one, passing it along to Cleveland Construction, and number two, telling that person to call Cleveland Construction and ask that their property be cleaned. As far as I know, the few follow-ups I've gotten, Cleveland has followed through with that. So I'll just say right now, we're trying to manage that as best we can. My understanding is that the work is scheduled to continue through November 25th. We still have another week or so with this to go, and of course, weather impacts that schedule as well. And at this point, I can answer any questions about our response. If you have technical questions on the legal marketing, you can answer those. And of course, if you want to have any conversation about moving forward, we're certainly happy to be part of that as well. So, thank you.
I'd love to know if there is, my understanding is we don't have an ordinance in place that says we can't use this material. So is there a process for being fined for this? There's nothing we can do, right? If they're willingly saying they'll do these other management processes, but we can't penalize them for something we don't have on the books that's not allowed.
So I'm going to bring Mark up to answer that. I'm going to leave this conversation with saying that you guys, everybody in this room knows this, but you know, North Carolina, we're a creature of the state. We're dealing with a little state. So in terms of managing the building code, we are extremely limited in what we can do through Mark's powers as chief building official. Now, there may be other strategies we can pursue. I'm going to let Mark give a little context on kind of where we're at on that in terms of building code.
Morning, Mark Feeney, Chief Building Official, City of Asheville. So to directly answer your question, no, we don't have that specific piece in place. The strength or the arm that we have for that is what we've already started to do, and it's happened on other projects, that if they just blatantly continue without any mediation processes or techniques, then we can stop the work, right? And we've done that. They didn't have the items that they identified earlier in the week. It says, okay, you've got to stop that. They're still constructing the rest of the building, but as far as the part that's impacting the city, and we put that to a halt until they bring those pieces back in place, which they have. But directly answer your question, no, it's nothing in place that actually significantly has a money impact except for stopping that. And of course, anytime you stop the process of construction, you're impacting them financially.
Can you be proactive when you see that on the plans, that there's going to be weakness on the construction site? Can you go to them and say, we require all the equipment to be vacuumed before they even start?
Yeah, and that is a conversation that we generally do have. So we know any of these projects that are getting up there, they're the mid to high rise projects, probably going to have that product, and so we give them at that point the heads up on that and say, well, you guys have to have mitigation in place. A lot of times that's maybe a year ahead of time. By the time we get there, that conversation is probably back. As far as reiterating that communication, because of the impact that it does have, we'll probably work on that piece of it.
I'm just reading an email from, I guess the developer, not from Cleveland, but just so we all have the same information. It does say they will begin using the vacuum rest while they smooth out the finish on the north and east elevations. But they have 8 laborers with backpack vacuum, shop bags, brooms, bags, etc., and they're walking the streets and sidewalks, cleaning as best as possible. They put some containment measures in place on level 18 where the majority of the cutting occurs. They have, I guess they sent a crew to Tingle Alley, which has some major issues. They're working with the local businesses. They've reached out to an equipment vendor to plan a walk behind the sweeper. And they've started a site work contractor to install filter fabric in nearby storm drains. So we all have that information.
Yeah, and that concept of the 18th floor, typically what'll happen on the installation is they're just handed, while they're on the scaffolding, they're just handed large pieces and they come into place and that sort of thing. And so they're breaking them, they're scoring and breaking them, and that allows for a lot of bigger pieces to come down. So what they've done on that is created that containment area on the 18th floor. They're actually calling up the dimensions, they'll cut them on the floor and then hand them down those panels. So that helps to that degree as well.
Smart.
Is there no aspect of this that would be considered littering? I know that if I'm walking down the street and a piece of paper blows out of my hand because it's a windy day, I'm just as liable for a littering ticket as I would be if I purposely threw it in the gutter. Why does there seem to be one set of rule for a person that's 6 foot tall and a different set of rules for a building that is 200 feet tall?
That's, I can't directly answer that. I don't know the actual littering rules, but I will say that it has gone through basically anybody who had some level of regulation, whether it's both within the city staff, or even higher environmental, air quality, Mike Matthews with the county, and also, organization that controls the water contaminations, right? And they stay a little bit out of it because it's a jurisdictional piece, but they have been informed, and they actually keep sending emails, hey, what's your update, what have you guys done? But it actually, for the littering rules, I don't have the answer to that, I don't know that question.
So this problem also seems to be way bigger than just like a single bad actor, one developer that isn't following rules or something like that. It's just bridges across all these different, all these different construction projects. Is there, does anybody know if there's an alternative to this project that doesn't have these downsides for the surrounding neighborhood that they need? I mean, is this a case of they're trying to save a percentage point on the materials cost, and that savings turns into our pollution? Is this what we have, or is there an alternative that we can suggest?
Yeah, it is definitely a standard in the construction industry. Anytime you want exterior architectural features, the amazing thing is with our fantastic downtown, with all of our old 1920s and that style building, you can see some of those great features. But that's back when we had we had tradesmen that could actually plaster cast and mount that to the sides of the buildings, and where we are in this day and age as far as skilled labor and time just doesn't exist anymore. So this is really the current construction trade-off for that if we're going to have these features.
And do you think there is that if you had the right tool that you could enforce this? Is it right now that we're just in a place that you don't have the right tool to enforce better compliance and keeping people's debris on their own site?
It's there's a limit. There's a limit to what can be contained, and there's a limit to how much enforcement is done. Basically when you're issued a permit, and you made a perfect statement with that, because keeping your own debris on your own site, right? So that's part of actually getting a permit, right? So if you get a permit, you're allowed to work within your site, and if you're going to impede on anybody else's site, you need their basically permission to do that kind of stuff. So that is, and that's basically what we have right now, is saying that you're not leaving this on your site, so we do have that ability of control. That's what gives us the ability to say you need to stop so you can contain this and that kind of thing. But beyond that ability, there really is nothing in place.
Interesting, we did, I know Andrew had sent me some examples of an ordinance in another city.
Yeah, I was going to reference that. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
So I'm going to say this very cautiously, because I don't know if this is in fact an authority we have in North Carolina or actual has, but in Ocean City, Maryland, they had a similar situation where they had these towers that were releasing the EFIS, and we've got some information from that municipality. Now they're able to amend their building code locally, so obviously we can't do that. But they didn't ban EFIS, but they made a requirement that vacuum tools be used. And I think they even had some sort of netting required. They didn't have the whole building, but they put some sort of netting around the scaffolding. And I think, like Mark and I recall, the scaffolding probably would have to be more permanent. I mean, you're not going to move scaffolding with netting around it. But I don't know if we have the authority to do that, but I mean, that may be something that the legal staff would need to look at. But, I mean, perhaps we can explore, is there any ability to at least require these preventive measures to be in place? Because I really don't want to do this again 6 months from now.
To my knowledge, there have been a series of watched them vacuum for a while. It was picking up some of the smaller debris. Ironically, their vacuums were about an inch diameter tube, so they were overlooking the large debris. So, it might be this. That's about both sizes. But it was really alarming for me to walk up Fillmore Avenue just the other day on the way to City Hall and see the storm grate with its no dumping, just go straight to the river symbol on there and then covered in this material, which is essentially styrofoam. Fish food. All right, well, we have a motion, and good luck looking into that. Or anything else, just let us know. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to, thank staff and, my fellow downtown commissioner for being responsive to this and getting right on. It was probably about 10 days ago I noticed this. And it feels like there's been a lot of activity and a lot of response in relation to this. So I'd like to say thank you, everyone.
Andrew, you mentioned there might be some public comment interest.
I hadn't heard,
Okay.
I anticipated public comment.
Does anyone from the public wish to speak to this? Okay, just making sure. Great. Okay, thank you. So back to our agenda. Next up, we have updates on Ashland Downtown Association. Notes here. Okay, so the speaker series wraps up for 2018, Tuesday, November 13th, with Mitch Silver, who's the Commissioner of New York City Parks Department. This visit will focus on the impact of planning and placemaking on physical and mental well-being. He'll be sharing insights from a variety of projects during his role in New York, including the Community Parks Equity Initiative, Parks Without Borders, and Cool Pools and Creative Courts. We're also actively planning for the speakers in 2019. So if you have a speaker you would like to see from Nashville, it would be a great time to suggest someone. We have the 72nd annual holiday parade, which is coming up next Saturday, November 17th. Parade will be from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. There are approximately 100 entries from nonprofits, schools, and youth groups. And Santa will be there. There will be some road closure information, so you can go to the Ashland Downtown Association's website, which is ashlanddowntown.org, and hear information about the street closings. Later that day, at about 5 o'clock, there's a partnership with ADA and the city and with the Northland Arboretum and the TVA. We'll be doing the downtown lights, lighting them up. So that's at 5 p.m. on the same day, November 17th. There will also be free photos with Santa, free hot chocolate. No, I'm sorry, the lighting ceremony is at 6 p.m. My mistake. Lastly, we are accepting applications for the board. So if you are interested or you know someone that is, a letter of interest and resume should be sent to Megan, who's our executive director for the ADA, by November 12th. So that deadline's coming up soon. I think that's all for the Ashland Downtown Association. I'll go right into the parking and transportation. I have a lengthy update, so bear with me, but it's some really good information. We met earlier this week, and our meetings are the first Tuesday of You know, we talked about that a little bit. We talked about how some meters around Grove Arcade have 15-minute meters, but right now, you know, we just moved to the smart meters, which have the app, and I guess it's limited to a 1-hour minimum right now. So we talked about could loading have smaller time frames. We talked about what would the impact be to businesses. We talked, Andrew had some great points. He was there about, you know, if you're gonna start paying to load, then you should really only pay for the time you're there. And then what if you're there 5 minutes, what if you're there 20? How does that work in increments? So I think we're gonna add the survey questions around that. And maybe it'd be a good idea to have Helen review some of those questions to make sure your thoughts are in there as well.
Because basically, the loading zones are not being enforced on a regular basis.
And my last update is that right now, the loading zones, if you violate one, the process is that you call the city staff and they send someone down and they time the violation, and then a series of minutes later, which I won't say, you can come back and be ticketed, and it's a $10 ticket. So a $10 ticket is less than what it now costs to park the day. So for the day. So what staff has done, to their credit, has been working on increasing those fines. They're going to council on the 27th of this month to propose raising the fee to $35. And then if that happens, it would roll out, I think, immediately or maybe in February.
For communication.
Yeah. Makes sense. So that would help.
It would help. The real problem though is it's not enforced.
And there's some weird enforcement laws. So we talked about, when we got the smart meters, we talked a lot about evacuation rates. So like if you pay for the hour but you leave early and the space empties out, should the meter reset? And there is technology that allows for you to identify when the car empties out. We had some before, but they were in the pavement, they didn't last. And now there's some on put on the post. They're pretty expensive, $600 a piece for each meter. So, you know, a similar thing.
I don't see how that's any different from any other meter. If I put in enough quarters for 2 hours and I leave after an hour, well, then somebody else got a free hour. That's all that means. I mean, if I use a loading zone and I think I might be there half an hour, and I put in half an hour and I leave after 10 minutes, well, you know, that's just the way it works. But the lack of enforcement is the real problem. And if they don't enforce, then it doesn't matter how much the fine is. You won't ever get paid because there's no enforcement.
Well, and I think the enforcement, it's there, but you have to report it. There's
Well,
no-
I've done it. I have reported people, you know, violating the loading zone half-hour rule.
Mhm.
So you have to call parking services, and they'll send somebody out eventually, and then they'll start timing them from the time they get there. And then if the person is egregious about violating it, it may
us about what the key policy or what the key issues we can work on are as a downtown commission, and ways to collaborate more as a downtown neighborhood of local businesses. So we anticipate that being live beginning of December and being up for approximately 2 months, 6 weeks to 8 weeks, and then the results, similar to last year, to be public in the middle of February. So we're working on that right now. Of course, any input, any questions you'd like to see on the survey, you're welcome to send it over to us. We do have quite a few, how many, 40 questions or so?
Yeah, last year we did 55, but I think we're trying to pare it down a little.
Yes, it's pretty comprehensive. It did inform us, and about, I think, 250 business owners and employees filled it out, and managers. So we did get some great feedback. It was super useful for us. Once that comes out, if you are a business owner or you know business manager owners, anybody interested, please let me know. We'll send you guys a link. And good news, on November 27th, City Council has agreed to announce a proclamation that December will be by local month. So the busiest shopping season. Our City Council is claiming it by local month, hoping that people will go local for the holidays and support our local economy. So that's huge. I think it shows solidarity, and we're really excited about that. So that's pretty much it. Our next meeting is Monday at 1:30 at the Downtown Association offices.
That's great. And thank you, Brian, for working on that, drafting some proclamation language and presenting it last time. Okay. Next up, we have Haywood Street streetscapes. Does this fit in here? Does it?
Plug this one in. Okay.
Is that a Chromebook?
It should be on here. You can use my computer for this one too. Yeah, my computer can be used. Wait, let's just check.
It's on the agenda. It's linked to the agenda.
Oh, it's not. Here, yeah. This one's 5 years old. I'm posting on my internet, it's not working for some reason.
You're not connected.
Yeah, it says limited access.
I'm connected to the internet.
Stephanie's got it on that. Okay.
Do you have it on the Google Drive?
It's on the agenda.
I could give you all an update while we do that.
Okay, great.
So the design review committee did not meet in September or October, but I just want to give you a quick update on what happened with 155 Billboard, since you all saw that project last month. So it was at planning and zoning this week on Wednesday, and the commission voted 5-2 in support. It was an interesting conversation. We have a conditional zoning, after design review, the staff report changes, so we add things that council, that planning and zoning looks at very similar to what council looks at. So we added sections about compatibility analysis, how does it meet the Living Asheville plan, how does it meet council goals? And there's an interesting section in the future land use section of the Living Asheville plan that says, for downtown, you know, it's a future land use area. And for downtown, it says lodging is an appropriate use downtown. I don't know what this one. However, the mix should be, you should pay attention, close attention to what the mix is, so not letting lodging dominate the mix. So, you could take that two ways, you could take that over downtown overall mix, where 155 is, there aren't a lot of hotels around, a loft is the closest one. I looked on a map, and most hotels are at Patton, College, or North, you know, that's where they're all close. So, I just added that, you know, we're trying to make sure we give all the information possible. The two folks who dissented on that vote, one person wanted the 3 houses to be left for office or residential use, and she said she's trying to establish objective criteria to evaluate a lodging use. And she said, I don't want to see any reuse or displacement, you know, development without displacement. So she didn't want to see any businesses or residents displaced for lodging use. So she thought the new building was fine, but not the houses. The other person said, well, I think the houses are fine, it's a use for a preserved building, let's make that 5-story building a residential building. That would be much better for people who work downtown and live in it. So,
I saw that.
It was interesting
Take
comments.
that. When they approved, did they have any recommendations with that approval? Or just straight approval?
they didn't make any specific ones, no. I mean, they can, and they often do.
What you said is reminding me of a conversation I had with some folks when we were kind of sat around talking about earlier, which is how do we, is there a way that we could look at the lodging or expansion district that categorizes new construction of vacant lots and redevelopment of existing buildings differently? Because I shared that concern with a woman that said, you know, it's like a flat iron, when we just start to displace a use or change the ratio of these two, that is different to me than filling a vacant lot. But I'd be curious to know if we don't, I think this came up with the census, we didn't really know like how many businesses are in downtown or how many office spaces are in downtown. We didn't really have that, and we talk mix of uses. I don't know if that's a document we have that we're some percentage lodging. Maybe, you know.
Oh, I think we have to be careful with that because, you know, there are situations, you know, thinking about, in a loft, for example, we displaced hot dog king. You know, I mean, was that really something we needed to preserve downtown? I mean,
People
that's,
were upset.
I know people were upset, but, yeah, I mean, you can't make a blanket statement that anytime you displace a business, it's automatically going to be a bad thing. Or like, AC Hotel is another example where we displaced a crumbling parking structure for a new hotel. I mean, that, I consider that to be an improvement over what we had there before. So I agree with the sentiment that I think we would have to be careful with the wording or something like that.
Sure, and it'd be a council thing, and it just makes me wonder if they could have different criteria after that. Could there be more evaluation if we're displacing something? Not that they were all this or that, and just the AC was a hotel, that was a parking, that was a hotel.
So is the law. Same.
Yeah,
Cycle.
cycles, maybe we keep that in mind as we
Although all
see so
can
many
afford the
hotels.
housing in the future, so it doesn't really matter.
All right, thank
Yes,
you.
just the other
Yeah.
quick update I'll tell you is the variance for the parking, the maneuvering and right of way to get approved.
It did.
For like a 2.5 hour long variance, hearing with lawyers and testimony and all kinds of, all the stops got pulled up, because it almost didn't get approved at the first meeting. So,
While we're having this little informal conversation, did that also happen at Place? Did that get approved with the?
that's what
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I didn't see the place, yeah, that's, yeah,
I
exactly.
drove by there on the way here, it's on my route into town, and, you know that parking spot displaced, trash, like,
Yeah.
where trash storage, those trash cans are now, like, on the sidewalk, crowding the entranceway into that parking spot that they carved out of the corner of the building. And I don't know how you could get a vehicle or a pedestrian past there, you know.
We'll
either
look
direction.
into that, thank you.
Yeah,
for
it
your time.
looks a little lovely over there.
Okay, are we back? We're ready? We're functioning? Good. Okay, come on up, Dustin. Sorry, patience.
Thank you for juggling the agenda. I'm Dustin Clemens. I work in the city's capital projects division. I'm one of their program managers. Wood Streetscape project, just at a high level. We don't have any design done yet. It's gonna be a massive project, so we wanna get out to all the commissions that we can to give them an update, and the downtown businesses and the residents as well, to give them an update on what we expect is gonna be coming in the very near future, because it's a massive project. It's a great project, but it's also gonna be very intrusive, and impactful for everybody in the area. So we want to get out early and just let everybody know what we're doing. So this presentation is really focused just, again, at the high level of, let's see. High level of just the scope, the budget, and the schedule for the work. We do anticipate coming back over the winter to present design options and design updates and details and things like that. But this presentation is just, again, a high level.
Dustin, if I could just note, we're planning to meet with the design review committee next week and get a little bit more depth. So anyone that would like to attend that show is 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 14th.
So the scope of the project primarily is a maintenance project. This is a bond-funded project, a transportation bond that was passed in 2016, and it's to fix the very poorly aging sidewalks along Haywood Street. As I'm sure everybody is very familiar, the bluestone that is there has not aged well. I would argue that it was not installed properly, and it's not the right material, and it's become a major maintenance issue, a major safety issue for people in the area. So luckily the bond was passed, and we do have money obligated now to pay for that and to fix that. So that's what we're focusing on, along with MSD, who is also planning an upgrade to their sewer system, generally in the same area. I'll show you an image coming up next of how those two projects overlap each other, because there's a significant overlap between the two. So again, this is primarily a maintenance project, dealing with sidewalk improvements and storm water and significant sewer improvements. So what that means is the street itself, the pavement itself will be replaced, the curb will be replaced, and the sidewalks will be replaced, which is everything within our neighborhood.
Is the MSD, are those improvements part of that bond money or separately funded?
They are separately funded.
Will they overlap the construction of both?
They will, yes, and I can talk about that more in detail coming up here.
Do you know if that's because they have failing infrastructure or because they're improving infrastructure for growth and projects nearby?
My limited understanding of MSD scope is it's poorly performing infrastructure that they have to do a lot of
Generally,
things.
cities.
So the red highlighted areas is the city's streetscape limits of construction, and then the yellow and green highlights are MSD's limits of construction. So the city streetscape is envisioned to go from the limits of right of way, from Patton Avenue to Vanderbilt Place. We're not anticipating working in front of 68 Haywood at this point in time, but we realize that the existing sidewalk there is in just as poor shape as the worst area everywhere else. So although it's not highlighted, we do anticipate that we will do some improvements in that area to deal with those safety issues. The MSD limits, the overlap is not exactly lined up perfectly. The Rankin Avenue line appears to go underneath the parking garage. In reality, it really just goes down the middle of Rankin Avenue. So what MSD's scope entails is total replacement of the pipe and the manhole structures. I think they have about a dozen manhole structures that need to be replaced within the right of way. And the lines themselves are about 10 feet deep on average. So we're talking substantial trenching within the roadway, underneath the sidewalks for both new MSD lines and new manhole works, which the limits of the right of way in this area, obviously it's building face to building face. So it's very tight construction, very difficult construction, very intrusive construction. So very early on in our planning efforts, we sat down with MSD and said, look, we've got projects that clearly overlap significantly. We all know that this is going to be very difficult work. Let's work together to try to minimize the impact for everybody and maybe minimize some costs as well. So the intent for our project is to combine the two projects. MSD will obviously pay for their own work, and the city will pay for its own work. But our plan is to hire one contractor to do both scopes of work, so that we don't have a scenario where we have two contractors reporting to two different owners, and there's delays in schedule, and there's tearing at the same sidewalk more than once, tearing at the same road more than once, dealing with two different traffic control patterns. It would just be a semi-nightmare scenario.
Just one line.
To do that. So they, you know, at the concept level right now, there are no agreements in place, but at the concept level right now, they're completely on board with allowing the city to administer the entire project, again, with MSD funding their portion of it. So that's the way we've, at the concept level, planned to move forward. So to date, the city has gone through the process. City council approved the contract with McNeil Engineers to do the design of the streetscape project and to incorporate the MSD work as well, so that we'll bid the project out at one time and have one contractor do the work. So I'll talk about budget a little bit more, and schedule a little bit more, but as far as the scope goes and the footprint goes, if there are any questions while I have this slide up, I'm happy to
Yeah,
answer.
I have a question. You mentioned that the curbing would be replaced. Are you keeping the granite curbing?
Yes, right now, we're trying to be as open as possible with material selection until we get feedback from the public and from business owners on what they would prefer. However, we have acknowledged the fact that we would require any developer to use granite curb, and so we should hold ourselves to no other standards. So we are planning to replace all of the curbing, whether it's granite now or not, with new granite curbing.
Do you see all of Haywood Street and the Haywood Street extension near the US Cellular Center being closed at the same time? Or will this be, you know, barricades and partial closings, or how do you envision that?
So that's going to be really one of the big upcoming challenges of the design process, is trying to figure out the phasing for construction. Again, knowing what the real work entails, which is trenching down the middle of the road. And with MSD work, you have to start at one end of the pipe and work your way uphill, and bypass during construction as well. So there's a lot of thought that we have to give to the phasing and how it works. So I would be speaking out of turn if I said that we have any plans right now, because we don't. But we do know that a lot of these roads, Walnut is a great example, Rankin is a great example. The right of ways there are very limited. If we're putting a 10-foot deep trench down the middle of it, there's really no alternative other than to close it.
So do you see this project, like, are you looking at 6 months, 8 months? What are you looking at?
We think it's going to be 9 months for the construction. Again, that's
So it'll be a year.
Yes. Yeah, I hope that's true. And the schedule that I'll show, and then talks about 9 months to a year.
Yeah, I don't know if you were here in 2004, but the street was torn up in 2004. And I thought it was to do some of the MSD lines. Maybe I'm incorrect with that. I don't know.
That was a water line project.
Was it water? Okay.
Close, but
I remember.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little concerned about that part of, well, I understand the work has to be done, so, you know, but I'm very concerned because basically anything that's west of Haywood is basically gonna be totally cut off unless you do 240 or you do Patton, and then come in the back way from Otis. So you're basically totally cutting off that western part of the CBD. It'll be very difficult to get to that.
And yes, and that's a concern that we're definitely aware of.
And then you have the impact on the US Cellular Center also.
Absolutely.
Justin, I have a question too. The original bond referendum in that project, was asphalt paving a part of that scope of work, or was it just repair and replacement of the sidewalk and the curb?
The scopes were very loosely
understanding was that it was basically for curb and improved sidewalks, and not the asphalt, because the asphalt was in good condition. And if, I just wanna make sure that if, you know, MSD is putting in their new lines, that they should be responsible for all the asphalt paving and restriping, then, because your budget is already so limited, I think that's an important consideration.
It's a great consideration, and that's, again, the high-level conversations that we've had with MSD, we both acknowledge that the roadway would need to come out for our work, so that's something that we should split the cost with in series. If the city's gonna be administering this project, there's a lot of overhead costs that come with that, we would want MSD to contribute to that as well. So we wanna be absolutely fair about the work as much as possible when it comes to cost.
So, I have a quick question. You said the MSD work starts out the week down. Is that correct?
Again, I should not speak for MSD, but my limited understanding of how they generally do sewer work is they start downhill.
Oh, we'll start down. Okay, so
Like
that,
Gravity's coming down here.
Gravity and waste.
okay, yeah, well, that's why I was like,
I'm sorry if I said that.
No, I had not thought of that, being on your face. So that would be, on the Battery Park side, on the Pat Avenue side, would be downhill side. So is that reasonable of us to expect that that is where we would see for the first work?
So, again, to speak totally out of turn with MSD's scope, the way I understand it, their line on College Street and that small service alley that extends off of it, the existing sewer that feeds those two lines is a little bit in question right now. So the first thing that they want to do is do some testing. When I say first thing is construction that the contractor will do. He'll do some testing to see what feeds that line, and if a certain scenario presents itself, then that entire scope of work would disappear and they wouldn't need to do any work.
Okay.
So their scope is a little bit in question when it comes to College and that side alley, but, and also with Rankin too. Rankin is another example where they're not positive that it has to be replaced until they can do some destructive testing and destructive investigation. So those two lines are sort of questions right now.
I hate to see college get kind of used about the sidewalks.
Right.
So the other question is, now the city's going to administer this project, but yet we have questions about MSD's scope of work that you can't answer yet. Are we waiting on you to have those conversations, or would it be appropriate of us, to ask MSD to give us some information?
I think, we've been having a really great working relationship with MSD so far, but we're also very early in the process right now. So we had one, we called it a pre-kickoff meeting with some businesses and residents that would be directly impacted by this in October, I think that was. And MSD came to that meeting, and Sean Armstead, who's their engineer, was able to answer all these questions, and I'm doing a terrible job at answering. So we anticipate having Sean involved in our upcoming meetings where we're actually presenting designs, and he's agreed to do that. So I think.
I think that answers my question.
I appreciate you bringing this up so early too, because I know we're thinking that parking and transportation subcommittee should look at whether or not it's an opportunity to restripe differently.
Yeah.
If we have 7 loading zones on this street.
And Dan has been ringing that bell early about loading and parking, so that's something we've been talking about quite a bit.
It's an opportunity. You had mentioned right at the beginning that you thought the for Bluestone was perhaps the wrong material or installed properly. We learned our lesson with that. Are we going to not do that again?
Absolutely, yeah. We would not do that.
So what's the difference? It's thicker,
It's the base and it's the thickness of bluestone. If we choose to use bluestone again, and that's a big if, because we do want to get community feedback on that. The standard depth of it is nominal 2 inches, so that means no less than 2 inch thickness on bluestone. Traditionally, you put down a 4-inch setting bed with like a sand cement mix binder between the two. So that's nowhere close to what is currently installed right now.
well, I'm glad that it's still being discussed, that it might not be Bluestone, because one of my questions was what's the financial impact if we just go on stamped concrete? And also in some other tables, I've been at
So I think that's a great segue. Yeah, a great segue into the budget discussion. When we set up this budget early on, I don't want to get into too much detail, but the budget was very limited, straight from the detail on board. And we realized quickly with MSD entering the picture that we wouldn't simply be replacing sidewalk and limited curb. It would also be changing curb elevations, probably in places. So when we set up this budget that you're looking at now, which is just a preliminary budget, we used square footage prices for high-end sidewalk material, like bluestone or like granite, wanting to budget for the most expensive option. And if the public business owners would prefer to just have something more standard like pavers or standard concrete, the cost of that would be significantly less. So that savings could be used on other transportation bond scope. So that's the way we sort of shifted on the money around to make it work.
And you mentioned that you would meet with those businesses. I'm guessing if I'm a business on Hayward Street, I'm gonna say, yes, of course I want it. But I wonder if we're talking about businesses talking to businesses that aren't on Hayward Street. And if that's maybe a good census question.
I hate to speak for them, but I don't think that's necessarily where they're coming from with it. I think a lot of them have been dealing with challenges for a long time. A lot of those are long-time business owners too.
Right. Sorry, no, but are we asking businesses that aren't on Hayward Street, or is it just them sharing their opinions?
Well, I mean, initially we're setting up focus group meetings. One of them is the design review committee next week. What we're gonna do in terms of larger public feedback is an online survey with that, it's a visual preference survey, so we are asking for public feedback on what that material is gonna be with focus group meetings.
It'll be interesting to see what your, public meetings disclose, but my suspicion is that people over there sick of blue stuff, don't have this issues.
If it is installed with the, if it is installed with the proper thickness and base, what's the lifespan?
It's as long as any concrete sign.
Oh.
If done properly. And that's the same with granite curve as well. Granite material will outlast concrete. So that's, a lot of people say granite curve is the best because it'll last forever.
Forever.
If installed correctly.
Yeah, we have granite curbing that was installed in the 1800s and it's still out there.
I'd like to add that, I'm glad, Dustin, you're part of staff managing this project. We all realize how this is going to be a really difficult road. And the fact that all this pre-work is going on, you're keeping everybody involved. Over your previous work before you came to Asheville, down in Charleston, we're in really good hands with those. So I'm glad the Wednesday Martin had for you.
It's like giving too much more time.
Exactly.
I've got a couple of questions. For the businesses, they're obviously going to be heavily impacted, and like David said, a lot of them are legacy businesses for us downtown. Is there anything going to be done for the time they have to close? Or I mean, I know there must be worried, and especially if it's happening, or affecting them in the busy season or when they depend on, customers.
Yeah, we've tried to do, our limited communication so far, we've tried to be completely honest with them and say, you shouldn't worry, because it's gonna be a big project, it's gonna be a massive project. It's not to make light of the styrofoam, but this is gonna be way more intrusive than styrofoam is from use. So we acknowledge that, first of all, we want businesses to be aware of that and to plan for that, but we understand it as well, so we want to make sure that we're communicating early with not only the designer to work out the phasing of the project to make sure that we can limit that impact as much as possible, not just for the businesses, but for the traffic that goes through there as well. We want to make sure that we clearly document the requirements in the design so that the contractor will realize what they have to do and how they have to do it, as much as we can dictate that, and ensure that businesses will always have access through their door, whether that's through, this boardwalk, a temporary boardwalk scenario to deliver a pit, or if it's just temporary we're thinking it through clearly. We're also absolutely open for suggestions as we have these public meetings, if there are ideas or suggestions that people have to help us make this less invasive. We're open to hearing.
And we have heard some ideas from the businesses that I think are interested relating to parking and space in a garage and some incentives in that way. On-site, an on-site contact that they can, that will be available at any time, on the street. I think we can work on something like that, which hopefully should be helpful. But we would welcome ideas, so we'll continue to talk with business owners about it as we get closer to construction and work on these incentives.
Are you including the businesses on alternate streets that are around Haywood? I think I would suggest that you include them in those discussions because it is going to impact, any businesses on Haywood, any businesses on Page or O. Henry. I mean, all of those businesses surrounding that area will also be impacted.
Yeah, I agree. And we do have a good contact list, a good starting place, but we need to continue to work on that to make sure we're reaching as many businesses as we can, especially those that are going to be directly impacted. We're looking at a tentative date of November 27th to have 2 meetings, morning and afternoon, with, focusing on businesses and residents that are directly impacted, but no one's going to be turned away. I mean, these are opportunities for people to come and participate and to learn and get input.
If you're gonna have a meeting November 27th, you're right in the middle of the Christmas season. And I think it's gonna be very difficult for people to attend the meeting, especially during the day. You might look at trying to do something from 8 to 9 before business is open and then do another one at like 6 to 7 so that you get a number of businesses to attend. If you do it during the middle of the day, no one's gonna attend.
We've heard 9 a.m. is good for a lot of businesses.
I'd like to note that I'm pretty sure during this construction, no one's going to complain about bus route volume. Because this is going to be really loud. And I say that because silence is a resource. We're going to need from a public library. Going forward, when you're talking with the stakeholders and the neighbors of this project, if there's time for, that there's going to be X many hours of jackhammering because the work entails that. If you can compress those man hours of in as tight as possible so that there's not 8 hours of jackhammering a day. If you can kind of look at how to schedule that kind of work when it has to happen, that I think that would be something really valuable to the neighbors and businesses in the area. So you could consider that. I also have a question of the public art on that street. The city has a sort of a bad history using public art when it gets moved. So can we just acknowledge that and put a tracker on the thing? I'm talking about the one from Yellow House. So just going in, let's make extra careful not to lose this one.
Probably maybe this is a good item for the local living economy group to talk about how we might come up with ideas to ease impacts to businesses. Sure, it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think so. And then I did have one more question. Is staging still set for 68 Haywood, or has that been decided yet?
Nothing has been decided. It's certainly a subject of discussion, but as far as I'm aware, nothing.
We're committed at this point in time, unless things change and they always could, to making sure that property is publicly available. So it's not going to be used for solely construction staging purposes. There could be an opportunity to put up a small construction office and have resources available at that site, but that site's going to remain publicly accessible.
So, schedule-wise, this is a horrible schedule, not intentional. But I did indulge on the bottom, just put key milestone dates for it. The takeaway as far as schedule goes is that we're currently working on the design right now. We intend to do that through the beginning of the year and bid the project in January, February timeframe. And hopefully, if we get good bids and MSC funding comes through and all the agreements with MSC come through at the right time, the earliest I think we would theoretically, if the bids come in crazy high and we don't have the funding, it could slip a year as well.
It seems crazy, it's hard to see that, but I can see on my screen, I see SOCOM on here, and thinking about graduation, this could be an enormous challenge.
It does disappoint if it takes a whole year.
Yeah, there's never a good time.
And we're sure that aligning with MSD and their schedule is going to be a cost and time savings measure.
I can say with 100% certainty that it would be cost savings.
Tearing it apart.
Yeah, it's tearing
Yeah,
it apart,
tearing it
it's saving it twice. It is, if I had a business on Maywood Street, I wouldn't want to have construction happen twice, even if
Right.
it was 2 years back to back. That's an enormous impact, so.
I guess I was thinking the sewer impact on one side of it. I'm sure you all know what you do.
Sewer line, it varies, sometimes it's in the sidewalk, sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it crosses the.
So this schedule, and it just seems to be a little off, in that if you look at it, it says right now we are at the multi-modal commission update with the schematic design. So we are skewed a little bit, but the goal is still to get going in end of first quarter of next year.
That's correct, yeah. The multimodal commission was an update very similar to
Oh,
this, just to
okay.
give them an early update on what's coming.
Any other questions? Very good information.
Thank you all, we'll be back.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, one quick comment. Just about the, you said the sidewalks in front of 68 people. I'm in no ways anti-safety, and I acknowledge the sidewalks are an issue there. But my personal history of working toward progress on that site, I know the council is currently inclined to fund the next step. Which maybe is perhaps trying to wait for other options. Throwing money at that sidewalk, we're hopefully about to take some other things that seem to be in contrast with, certain goals. Before there's any work on 68, in front of 68, I would really like to see that everybody's working hand in glove about what's supposed to happen there. Because otherwise we're not spending money very well, and we're not gonna have, and we're gonna put in a 50-year sidewalk that's gonna be there for 18 months or something.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I didn't mean to get the impression that we would replace that sidewalk with, the granite or loose, and we would just address any safety issues. So, what I would envision is just a concrete sidewalk to make it safe, but nothing else.
That's one clear thing.
Is there any damage to trees because of this?
That's a great question, and it's one that we've had some discussions about. It depends on what design takes place. I mean, even replace with light materials would have some impact on the tree roots in there. So I think the short answer is yes, there would be impacts to trees. And there are different scenarios if we want to widen the sidewalks and change that type of thing, then there could be an opportunity to replace the trees, which I know is very controversial on both sides of it. So it's something that we're going to study it, and we're going to ask for input on it, and we know we're going to get it.
I think that was the street someone chained themselves to a tree.
Will the sidewalks be widened to 10 feet?
They could be. That's one of the things that through this design process we'll present some options, that we go moving forward.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your information. Okay. We are now on to Dan's,
Good morning, everyone. I
developer, in this case, Ashland Heights or Big Trees, could have notified or sent a letter, or dropped a letter, something other than expecting people to pay attention to social media or the website for the city, which I know a lot of people just don't do. So that might, something we could address. Next one.
I mean, I think, yes, we have to learn the lessons, and it's hard when the city, we had no real capacity to do all that. It's somebody else doing it, but it is a lesson, because we expect fully to be doing more of this.
Yeah.
We need a, we're developing, I think Dan's been working on a system for the city part. I don't know, we are thinking about how would we, when we start getting these requests, which we expect, how do we handle those? So maybe that's also the time to say, okay, here's how you need to notify people.
Yeah.
I think Mike Rule did go door to door, Sewell.
He did.
I don't say Mike Rule. Mike Sewell was our traffic engineer for 15 years ago, so that dates me, but Mike Sewell did go door to door, but I don't, he probably listened to phones.
Or they were there, yeah.
If you have a 99% engagement rate, that sounds great unless you're the 1%.
Right.
That's true.
Sage had mentioned this, but just to make sure you all are aware, planning to install meters in the South Slope, beginning on Banks and Buxton Avenues. Also from there, likely on Cox Avenue, just down to Hilliard. We're gonna talk with the South Slope Neighborhood Association next week, and that will likely begin early next year. And just a reminder that there's a new transit app, and it works not only in Asheville, but other cities, so it's great. Also, we still have monthly parking available, at the city lease lot on,
Can I say
Cox
something
and
about that?
Ashland.
We
Yes.
talked about this at the parking and transportation subcommittee meeting, and I would like to encourage, all of us sitting here and the public to share that that is still available. I think we had a couple like hiccups when we were rolling it out, and had to call and wait a wait list, but then not everybody was confirmed and everybody thought it was full. I think that there are people that will really benefit from being able to lease this lot at $70 a month, which is significantly cheaper than some of the other decks and options. And I just think there are people out there that aren't aware. So if you have a network, or if you have businesses or residents that you know in downtown, I encourage like social media shares and things, help get the word out. 'Cause part of my concern is that we are using this, we did the downtown census, we said parking was the #1 issue, so staff was really respectful of that and did, made this move. And if we don't feel that the demand is there, it might change how we continue in the future. And I think that there is a demand, of just maybe not some awareness. So please spread the news. I think there are 40 spaces left.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
City-owned property redevelopment for affordable housing, so the consultant team is gonna be here next week. They are, yes, they're gonna go to the, Housing and Community Development Committee of Council on November 15th and provide updates. If there's support from that committee, they're gonna go to City Council December 11th, but council can direct staff on, next steps. Holiday programs, these were mentioned, holiday parade is coming up on Saturday the 17th. Obviously, there's gonna be some closures and disruptions associated with that, and we'll be kicking off, the holiday decorations program later in the day, starting at 5 p.m. Decorations have expanded to Richard Park this year, and also to Butler Village.
consultants will be in town. And, so everything Sage just talked about will be, we'll have different stations with different information. Some of them will be like some initial massing. Now that massing is not what's gonna be built, so you have to like be able to remove yourself. It's an example of what could be built. So what we've been doing, or what that consultant's been doing, is looking at the number of units. We're trying to get on how much it costs, what's the subsidy, all of that, doing all that math and saying, okay, what could that look like? So, and we'll also be at HCD next Thursday morning with the consultants there, in the office. And, yeah, so it's a great time to get involved and see what's going on. And we're trying to make sure anything we do in, I can't speak for every department, but we're working on our public participation as a city, right? So we're trying to make sure when we present something in the meeting, we're also gonna make it available online, so that if you can't be there, you can get to the content. So, that open house content's not up yet, but I'm sure right after that happens, we'll make sure it's on if you can't be there.
I shared that too. When I first heard that the city of Asheville was gonna try and become a developer of land, I panicked a little. I was like, wow, this is risky. I'm so impressed with how it's happened. The consulting firm has been amazing. The data and reports I saw were amazing. The public information and transparency has been amazing. I mean, kudos to y'all all working on this. Stephanie Lack, I think she's part of that team as well, but it's been pretty impressive. And I think we've got studies on the front end that are just very informative that a lot of people in the community would never see because they're not in that development realm. And I think it's informative of the entire process of developing a city or building in general. And yeah, just thank you for doing it so well.
The subsidies
It
needed,
does not.
and those subsidies needed to develop are staggering.
Yeah,
Just
10.3 million.
well, like $70,000 to $80,000 to $90,000 a unit.
Yeah.
And that's for affordable housing.
But I encourage everybody to look at that. I think you might find it fascinating.
And Sasha, the meeting now is Thursday, November 15th.
Wednesday, well, the public open house is Wednesday night.
Oh, 14th.
4 to 7 down at Public Works. And then HCD is meeting the next morning.
I think it was
Are we looking at
time.
It's,
It's a special time. I can't remember.
10 a.m. 10 a.m. and it's on the 6th floor of City Hall.
And that public meeting, has that been promoted already? Maybe we can make sure.
We're a little behind, but there's a big push going on right now. So.
It'd be great if someone in the media actually linked to those documents and mentioned that. All right. Any other questions or comments for Dana in her update? Thank you. Thanks. All right, what's next? All right, new business. Downtown Master Plan updates, the Public Space Management Committee. Andrew has been championing this process. Do you have an update for us?
Yes, I do. So basically, today I'm just going to look for commission's blessing on the makeup of that committee. And so Dan and I met and actually talked about kind of who we wanted to put together, kind of what organizational roles we saw to put together for this. And so what I'll let Dana speak about the city staff input on it. But what I wanted to see was a restaurant owner with outdoor dining experience, an organizer of outdoor special events, a design professional organization, somebody with a landscape architecture background, downtown resident, someone of experience as a homeless advocate, and a representative from either the TDA or another sort of tourism group, and perhaps a media outlet, newspaper boxes, that kind of thing. We had a busking representative, not myself, know, so let's make this, let's make this nice and inclusive, try to learn from that.
Okay, and then I guess staff will have some kind of presence in meetings possibly. I know y'all are stretched, so you'll figure it out.
Important, and we're committed to that. I know for this first section, that's gonna be me, really to develop the survey and the high-level guiding principles for public space. From there, as that might translate into a framework for the way the city manages other programs in the public realm, we're still working through exactly what staff can be dedicated to that. But this first section feels clear, I think you can get through it, it's really important, and I think the public buy-in is really important, so we'll get through that.
I really think you want special events represented.
So next steps, Dana?
I'm
Next-
happy to make a motion for those 12 goals. Is that where we're at? Seems like that's where we're at. And then, my understanding from our other subcommittee processes, then you, as the chair of the subcommittee, will go out and start soliciting people for those roles. I'm suggesting universally invite everyone that might be interested, not just handpick, but, and then, we don't really have to approve the individuals, but an update on who they are and when you're meeting. And then possibly like we do with the other subcommittee, adding it to the downtown commission page, doing the agendas that you think are public, getting that same framework going.
And with this number of people involved, I think it might be helpful to have a regularly scheduled meeting date, so we're not trying to pull together meetings every time, so.
It also helps if in case 3 of us decide to attend,
Yeah.
which might really happen, I would think, because I can attend. If any one of you drops in, Andrew and I are there, then we're covered. So, I'll move that the downtown master plan, so we have an official name, where to go, Public Space Management Committee has 12, up to 12 roles that include, do you want me to read them again?
Let me make sure I have them. Restaurant owner with outdoor dining, organizer of outdoor special events, design professional / organization, landscape architect. And we do want to keep that separate? Do we want them to be 2 or do we want them?
I'm not sure, but design professional could be very different than landscape architects, maybe just keep them, they may not fill.
Downtown resident, I would say we probably would wanna look to hold this in February, just
That's
to
the
say.
same, yeah, February, so,
Early, early.
yeah, okay. And then do we want to, I know we're talking about a travel plan for later in that year, potentially join with another commission, but are we trying to join this one? This is just the downtown commission talking about its planning for the next year, right? We're not trying to do a joint. Yeah, okay. So aim for February, early February.
And then
It's going on every 5 minutes.
Call IT support for that, come on.
Perfect. Okay, any
And next fall is gonna come out quick too, so we'll,
Yeah,
need to,
next
next
fall.
fall's gonna come out quick too, so we'll start
Travel.
thinking about the trip.
Give you plenty of time to
Do
get ready.
David's trouble.
Create a committee.
I was looking forward to a trip, that's been my only vacation this year.
Oh,
You'll get one.
we'll get one, yeah, next October. And I think, part of that will come out, what we do in that retreat will probably come from what we do in our planning retreat of what we're focusing on. So if we talk about sudden surge of residential population, maybe that isn't the case with the retreat. So, okay, so in for early February, retreat planning for just this commission, great. Okay, we have a couple more things, the downtown commission appointments. And I guess, do you want me to speak to that, or did you have something you want to say?
I have the dates, so on November 5th, the vacancy flyer for downtown commission openings was posted. The application deadline is December 27th. Applications are sent to council and to board chairs for any recommendations on the 28th. And January 8th, council's board and commission committee can review and provide recommendations to council, which would go to council that same night. So appointments will either be made January 8th, and if that doesn't happen, interviews happen on January 22nd, and appointments would happen at that next council meeting. And so we do have some commissioners that are eligible to serve second terms, and that's Brent Campbell, Franzi, and Pam. And let's see, and Dane, I think you're completing your second term, so that's.
We're actually realizing Dane's only been on for 4 years. We talked about this at the beginning.
But I'm fine with
He's
that.
fine with it, but as far as calendar things, you might want to talk to Sarah about.
I had checked so many times.
He filled an appointment and then served a
construction of the Second Avenue subway. And that was so disruptive to businesses along Second Avenue. I just want to emphasize or echo what I've heard here, that it's really important that everything be done that's possible to make sure that businesses are protected. That there's not only access, but there's advertising, there's signage, whatever it takes to make sure that residents and visitors know that they can still get to business while this is happening. Because there was construction and there was destruction in New York when the subway went in. Now it's great, but a number of businesses went under because of the construction. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close with public comment at 10:20. We have informal discussion of future agenda items. Anyone? By the next time we convene, the downtown census will have started. That's the goal. If you have thoughts or ideas on questions you would like some response to from the greater community, send them to Franzi and I. Time is of the essence. I know we are hard at work getting it going right now, so